Hi, today we're going to be looking at what are called the determinants of supply and demand. In the previous class we looked at the basic supply and demand model, and we looked at the basic graph where supply and demand form an X, and at the intersection of those two curves we find the price and quantity of a good. But those supply and demand curves don't always stay where they're at. Those supply and demand curves will often shift, either increasing demand or supply by shifting to the right, or decreasing supply and demand by shifting to the left. What we want to understand is what causes supply or demand to shift. And so that's what we call the determinants. So the goal for today is to understand those determinants and begin to understand how those changes affect price and quantity in the market. So first we'll look at demand. And there's a mnemonic that will help you remember the determinants of demand. That mnemonic is merit. And we're going to look at each one of these in a little bit more detail, but the short answer is that the market size, the number of consumers, the expectations of consumers, the price of goods that are related to the good we're talking about, our income, and any of our tastes and preferences, if those things change, demand shifts, either increasing by moving to the right or decreasing by moving to the left. One question people have before we go much further is why a shift to the right means more and why a shift to the left means less. And the reason why, we'll take it from the demand's perspective, is that our demand curve is a combination of price and quantity. If the price is here, then I'll want a quantity of this amount. If the price drops, then I want more. So that's what our demand curve is. It's just a combination of prices and quantities. But what if instead of wanting this amount, let's say 1 unit for a price of $4, I now want $2 or 2 units at a price of 4. And what if at a price of 2 I had previously wanted 3 units and now I want 4? I'm beginning to see these points are no longer on the original curve. They are beginning to form a new curve, and that new curve is essentially parallel to the original, but to the right. Similarly, I could say that if in order to get me to buy 1 unit, you had to charge me a price of $3, and in order to get me to buy 2 units, you had to charge me a price of $2. Then what I'm beginning to see is that I want fewer goods for the same amount of price, the lower price. And so I have now shifted the demand curve to the left. Again, it's a parallel line from the original. It's just to the left because now I want fewer goods at the same price than I did before. So that's why shifting to the right means more, shifting to the left means less. With demand, it's going to shift for market size, because if there are more buyers, there's more demand. There are more units that people need at the original price than before. And if there are fewer buyers, it's the opposite. And so when you see markets change in size, we're going to see demand shift. For example, as baby boomers get older and they go from being 50 and 60, now 70 and 80, there is an increased demand for adult diapers because they have bathroom issues as they get older. Because there wasn't a large sizable group of people in the past that needed that product, the demand was low, but now demand is much higher because there's an even larger group of people that need that product than in the past. When it comes to expectations, our desire to buy something now or later is dependent on whether or not I think the price will be higher now or later. For example, if I think prices will rise in the future, then as a consumer, I'd better buy that product now while the price is relatively low. Like gasoline. If you know that gas is going to increase in price next week, then it makes sense for you to hurry up and get your tank filled now when the price is still relatively low. And if you think that the price is going to drop in the future, then you're going to wait. And so your demand will shift to the left now because you don't want to buy it now. You'll buy it when it's cheaper. So again, if I think gas prices are going to drop by 10 cents tomorrow, then I'll wait to fill my gas tank. And if I think prices are going to continue to drop day after day after day, I'm going to keep waiting and driving longer and longer and longer between fueling and running the risk of running out of gas because I'd rather wait and pay lower price later than to buy it right now. Related prices comes down to whether the good is a substitute or a complement. That is, do I use these two goods together or are they separate? So in the case of goods that are substitutes, coffee and tea, I can either drink one hot drink or the other. I don't often sit and drink both in the morning. Then the change in the price of one good will affect the demand for the other. If coffee is more expensive, I'll want less coffee, but I still want a hot caffeinated drink, so that means that I will demand more tea. If they're complementary, it means that they go together. So if I buy one good, I always buy the other. Peanut butter and jelly comes to mind. So if the price of peanut butter rises, that means I'll want less peanut butter than before because it's more expensive. And so if I'm buying less peanut butter, it stands to reason then that I won't need as much jelly, in which case the demand for jelly will decrease and we'll see a shift. Income's pretty obvious. If you have more money, you want to buy more stuff. So in almost every case, when you have more income, you will have an increase in demand. This is true for what we call normal goods. If you have an inferior good, it means that when your income rises, you want less of it because you were buying it simply because you were poor. But now that you have more money, you'd rather buy something nicer. So you can travel by bus when you have a low income, but once you start making some money, you can afford to fly on a plane. You get there quicker and more comfortably, and that's why buses are what we call inferior and planes are normal. And then finally, tastes and preferences, fads, affect our demand for a product. If we want something more than we did before because now it's cool or popular or interesting, then demand increases. And if we no longer want that cool or interesting thing, demand would decrease. So silly bands were popular when students were little and people couldn't get enough of them. And so the price rose and it became increasingly more expensive to be able to purchase silly bands. But now nobody wears those ridiculous things, and so you can't even buy them. There's basically no demand for them. And if there was demand for them, it'd be extraordinarily low, and the cost of them would be very much lower than they were in their prime when they were very popular. When it comes to supply, we use the mnemonic trice. That is, there are changes in technology. The prices of related goods has an effect on supply. The price of inputs, that is, the things that go into making something. The number of competitors, and also our expectations. When it comes to technology, when we improve our technology, it gets cheaper to make stuff. And when it's cheaper to make things, I can make more for the same amount of money. And so when I can make more for the same amount of money, I will see my supply increase or shift to the right. If we were to have some sort of loss of technology, we'd see a shift to the left. Related prices, just like with demand, some goods are substitutes and some are complements. So you can either heat your house with gas or you can heat it with heating oil. If the price of natural gas were to rise, then that would indicate that companies would want to put more effort and resources into providing natural gas and fewer resources to putting in heating oil. So the supply of heating oil would reduce as companies focus more on gas exploration and providing natural gas to its consumers. Sometimes the products are complementary. They go together. And so when you drill an oil well, you often get natural gas as a result of drilling for oil. So if the price of oil were to rise, that would mean that I would be drilling more oil wells, and as a result, I would end up with more gas as well. So the increase in price of gasoline would lead to an increase in the supply of natural gas because they come together when you produce them. The price of inputs is important. That is, the price of the goods that go into making things affects the supply of the thing that they are making. For example, if the price of pepperoni rises, it's more expensive to make pizza than before, so they cannot make as many pizzas as they did in the past with the same amount of resources, and so the supply of pizza would decrease or shift to the left. So the more expensive it is to make something, the fewer things are being made, and therefore a shift in supply to the left. Competition just means there's more people making the product, there's more product available. The supply shifts to the right. And if there are fewer suppliers, the supply shifts down or is reduced. The last item has to do with expectations. If I'm a producer and I think I can get a higher price in the future, then because I like higher prices as a producer, because higher prices means more profit, I will provide my products in the future and not now. If I think that the price of gasoline will be higher in the summer, then as an oil company, I might reduce my supply of gasoline now in order to have more on hand during the summer when I can get a higher price. Or if I'm selling fireworks, I don't set up fireworks stands in January and February because no one wants to blow stuff up. But when we get closer to July, people's interest increases to want to watch things explode in the sky, and so now I'll supply more fireworks and make them more available in the market because now people are willing to pay for them. When either supply or demand shifts, it will create a new equilibrium price and it will create a new equilibrium quantity, and those shifts will have an effect on how the market operates. We'll do some more practice in class so you get a better appreciation for how these changes affect the equilibrium price and quantity.